Or, we have these conversations of who should be on there, and we get them to join and then they're overwhelmed. It's not what we promised. It's because we confused everything together. And I'm not saying, you're right, if you're only a group of 5, people are doing everything. But let's stop for a minute, take a breath and say, what should they be doing at this meeting here? So one of the things I've been talking a lot to smaller groups is to have 2 meetings back to back. You have your 90-minute operational meeting, because that's really what we're all worried about. We're all worried about that event and everything else that has to go on. And you end that meeting, and then you start your 45-minute, hour-long, 30-minute, I don't care, governance meeting that is about governance stuff. It's about our policies and our decision-making and our values in the future. And you separate them, because if you don't separate them, you're never going to do them. I had a question here, and then I think there was one back there.
We've got Indeed. I'm not sure who was up first. I'm going to go ahead and then you.
Yes, my question is simple. I just want to see if you can list some of the samples of governance, board work, operation, because it will help us, like even though we may be 3, 4, 5, at least once we know those roles, as we grow, we can grow into separating them.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay.
And you're the same person maybe fulfilling more than one role at a particular point in time. So at one point you're wearing the governor's hat, which is saying we need to set direction, we need to understand how well our organization is doing to serve our community, for example. At one point you're wearing that hat, asking those critical questions. Then you might very well be, and maybe you make a decision as a board at that point, saying we need to focus on X if our organization is going to be relevant. Then you take the hat off and you put on then you might be the operational hat that says, okay, so how do we implement X? See, then you're starting to get into the doing stuff, the operational doing, but you're now shifted from being the direction setter to the implementer. But you need to know when you're wearing which hat so you don't create the confusion.
So let me give a tangible example, and then Peter, and then there's a comment over here that I just took the mic from. So I used the example of a daycare earlier. A child care center. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. If we were having a risk conversation about what is our level of risk tolerance, sorry, I'm trying to stand, I know, Peter, I'll get you to sit your shit. I'm trying to stand where that column is. If our board is talking about what amount of risk is okay, that's a governance conversation. Not what risks are okay, what amount of risk is okay. What is our risk tolerance level? Let's create a policy about what kind and how much risk we are willing to carry when it comes to the development of programming in our child care center, right? We want to make sure that we have safe play, but we know that children develop with some level of risk. We've looked at our insurance policies. We are willing to carry this much risk. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Also, I can't see over here because of the light, so you'll have to shout out if you need me to notice you. Okay. So we're making a policy on the risk. The board work is writing the policy. What happens is we don't have the conversations because there's different perspectives in the room. So we just assign somebody to write the policy and go, and so we skip the governance part altogether. Does that make sense? This is what happens to so many groups is rather than having the conversation, what are our values? What are our principles for early learning development? And exploring that, we skip it and say, hey Joe, can you go write the policy? That's the board work, is creating the policy. Operations now falls to your staff and your executive director or your volunteers, and maybe they're the same volunteers as your board members, to how they enact that policy. So you've said we're this risk tolerant, we're allowing these kinds of activities, our children have to be this safe. Now they go and create programs around that. They go and make sure the playground fits in that space. They decide the paths that they're going to go on for walks, or the field trips, or the activities, the play centers that are happening inside the daycare. That's operational. Administration is the paperwork all around that. So making sure that the insurance is filed, making sure that the staff are hired, making sure that you have the products they need to be able to do those activities. Does that help? Any questions on that chain? And then. You know, Esther's, you've been waiting for a while. Take this one first.
Okay. I'm getting questions from the board of directors right now live.
Are they here?
No, they're in Calgary. but I think everybody will relate to this question. So my board said, you need to ask them, right? How can we build these things when we don't have funding for it, and that you are only one person with limited capacity? And then one of the board members said, and charitable status is not the answer. So